Young adults have never checked their credit score, thinking it doesn't matter until it does. Here with more on why and what to do about this is Bobbi Rebell, consumer finance expert at cardrates.com and a certified financial planner. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
All right, so why aren't more young adults paying attention to their credit scores? Why don't they look?
Well, the truth is, Jacob, it feels optional. And especially if you're fortunate enough not to have debt, you think, well, if I don't have debt, my credit, I'm sure, is pretty good. But that's not necessarily the case. In fact, it's usually not the case. You have to work to build up your credit, which we'll talk about in a minute. And a lot of young people just lack financial literacy. They don't understand how credit works and why it's going to impact them, especially in many of the milestones that they hope to achieve as young adults.
Maybe that's it. Maybe they're thinking, well, I'm not going to get a home for, several years. When does your credit score start to matter in your purchasing?
It starts to matter actually sooner than you might think. So you don't necessarily have to be buying a home, although it certainly absolutely will matter if you go out and try to get a mortgage. But it could matter if you are even trying to rent a home. A lot of people don't realize when you apply for jobs, very often a potential employer will check on how creditworthy you are, whether you have a good credit score. And I should say a good credit score, good enough, I would say, is somewhere in the 700, 740 to 799 is considered pretty solid. If you're over 800, gold star for you. That is amazing, but it takes time to build up to that. So it's important to be paying attention to it sooner rather than later so that you have it in place when you do need it.
Job applications, I was not thinking about that, and renting. Okay, so let's say that your credit score is not in the 700s. How does a less than ideal or bad credit score cost you even when you're young?
Yeah, it can really cost you in terms of how much you're paying for things. Believe it or not, life is not fair. Very often, if you haven't built up a good credit score, you might be paying higher interest rates on everything from higher credit cards to various loans that you may have. It may not even allow you to qualify for a loan if you haven't built up credit. Higher deposit requirements if you were, for example, applying to get an apartment. And then, of course, as I mentioned, the jobs. And I didn't mention, you can find out your credit report for free. Annualcreditreport.com is a wonderful resource. You can also go to many of the credit agencies. They'll often give you at least one free report, but just beware, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, they will try to sell you some of their services, monitoring credit, things like that. That's a personal choice, but you can get your free credit report, annualcreditreport.com.
Okay, let's say that I'm in my mid-20s. I decide to check. Turns out I've got something in the 600s. I don't know how it's got there, but what are my options to build back or fix the credit score?
So first of all, if your credit is in the 600s, do not feel bad. It's not what you've done. It's what you haven't done. It's just in many cases, your age. You just haven't been alive long enough to build up a solid credit score. And that's something that shouldn't be held against you, but it often is. So sometimes you may have to get somebody like a parent, maybe a grandparent, an older friend, if they're really nice, to co-sign with you if you are, for example, renting an apartment. And that's not a black mark on you. That's just the fact that there hasn't been enough time to build up. So how do you add time? One way to add time is to get on somebody's credit card and get permission as a user there, because then you can kind of add on to their time. So if a parent has a credit card outstanding for 30 years and they put you on that credit card, that's going to help you instantly. And that's something that's really kind of priceless because we can't age ourselves, nor do we want to. The other thing you can do is get a credit card in your own name and be paying on time. Paying on time and set up automation is often a great way to do this, is going to help the late payment feature. The biggest thing that they look at in your credit score is, do you pay on time? Because this is kind of like your financial report card. It's basically saying we can depend on this person to pay back their loan. So never pay late. Also, keep your utilization low. That basically means if you have credit allowed for a certain amount, let's say you're allowed to borrow $3,000, try to borrow only like 30% of that, maybe even 10% of that. It sounds counterintuitive, but they want to know that you have more room, more wiggle room And again, that you're reliable, that you're not sort of maxing out those credit cards. And then finally, one other thing to think about is checking for errors. That annualcreditreport.com, if you see an error there, maybe you have a common name, even not a common name, maybe some scammer got in there and put a black mark on your credit, make sure to correct that. Always try to do that in writing, whether it's by email or by mail, whatever it is, so that you have a track record, proof that you've disputed that, and follow through on it for sure.
Lots of great advice. Bobbi Rebell, thank you once again for joining us this morning. Have a great day.
Hey, another good thing is next year, Texas is joining other states and having incoming freshmen. They're going to have to start taking personal finance courses, at least one before they graduate high school by the year 2030. That's so important. I wish they would have made us do that.
I was just going to say that. That is such invaluable information, and knowing that earlier could help these kids out.
So